for many Iranians, an apology from their government is simply not enough. Social media footage shows security forces firing tear gas at crowds trying to reach Tehran's main square. Protesters are angry at what they say is leaders' attempts to cover up the truth behind the downing of Ukraine International Airlines flight PS752.
We've seen 7 people shot so far. It's all blood.
In Canada, more emotional outpourings. This time mourning the dozens of Canadian citizens who died in the crash.
My family is devastated. They've lost the most supporting person they've ever had. I lost my second dad. And the family, the wife and the 2 kids, honestly, I can't imagine how they're going to go through this.
At one of the vigils, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised to pursue justice.
176 lives were extinguished in the space of a few minutes last Wednesday morning, but you are not alone. Your entire country stands with you tonight, tomorrow, and in all the years to come. We will build that future they all dreamed of together.
On Saturday, Iran admitted its military had accidentally shot down the aircraft, which it had mistaken for a hostile target. The country had been on high alert after carrying out missile strikes on US targets in Iraq. The attacks were in retaliation for the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a US drone attack. Iran initially said the crash was
demonstrations in the streets of Iran against the regime. Do you support those protesters, and would it be a good thing if they brought the regime down?
Well, the protesters are protesting, as I understand it, this brand of protesters, about the fact that that plane went down, and many students were on that plane, and these are largely students in the street. I think the Iranians should have not had commercial flights going off when there was.
They're calling out the regime for lying. They're saying death to Khamenei as well.
No, well, whatever it is.
Iranian officials are trying to contain a 3rd day of angry protests.
Security forces fired tear gas at demonstrators. Unconfirmed reports say live bullets were also fired at the crowd. In Tehran, protesters tore down posters of General Qasem Soleimani, killed by the U.S. earlier this month.
President Trump tweeted yesterday to the leaders of Iran, "Do not kill your protesters."
The enemy is not America, it's within. One social media post shows students refusing to walk on large U.S. and Israeli flags painted in the road. Just hours after Iran's military admitted shooting down the passenger plane, the protests began. Thousands of mostly young people joined angry crowds in Tehran. And the protests continued last night, too.
Russia is going to win from this, and I think that's a pretty clear one. Both Putin and Russia's interests are aligned here, which is that they want the U.S. out of the Middle East, or they want the U.S. to have a reduced role in the Middle East.
Okay, Soleimani was a Quds Force commander, and the Quds Force was responsible for American deaths and so forth and so on. This is a war. We started it. We are waging economic warfare against Iran. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that it is to be expected.
The killing of Soleimani seems so eminently in the national security interest of the United States. I mean, everybody by now knows the record.
There is no security under Islamic regime in Iran.
A small crowd of Iranian Americans gathered at Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. Sunday evening for a candlelight vigil to remember the innocent people killed in recent weeks in Iran. including 176 passengers of a Ukrainian passenger jet and hundreds of Iranians killed in protests sparked by gasoline price hikes in November. Tehran's admission that it shot down the airliner has galvanized anti-government sentiment, some protesters told VOA.
People don't want Iranian government, and Qasem Soleimani was a terrorist. You know, if you go in the street, that means you might be jailed, you might be killed in the street, and these people are so brave.
U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his support for Iranian protesters Saturday, tweeting in English and Farsi. Some of the Iranian Americans at the vigil thanked him for his support.
There is so much hope right now. I hear it because people can read and they feel like, okay, now the President of America, which is the most government country in the whole world, is with us. So they're feeling a lot of hope.
It's nice of him to eat in Farsi or in English, but we wanted to tell him we don't want war.
When the people are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back!
A mixed crowd also turned out in Los Angeles Sunday, many of them chanting against any U.S. military intervention in Iran. One young film student told VOA he had spoken with his family in Iran last night, and they plan to put their lives on the line to protest against the Tehran government.
It's important to realize that the people in Iran know what they want. The people in Iran are fighting for their own freedom, and we don't need any savior. The United States doesn't care about us.
Videos posted online showed protesters in Tehran and other Iranian cities Saturday and Sunday shouting anti-government slogans. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Washington.
We're tracking breaking news out of Iran. That country's foreign minister says Flight 752 was unintentionally shot down by an Iranian missile. In a tweet, the minister says that, quote, human error led to the disaster. An Iranian military statement reveals the plane was mistaken for a hostile target. The country says those responsible for the strike will be prosecuted. Iran's government had repeatedly denied accusations it was responsible until now. Wednesday's crash killed all 176 people on board, including 57 Canadians. Well, for a closer look at this, we've reached out to Brian Katulis. He is in Bethesda, Maryland, and he's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, which describes itself as a progressive think tank. He also served with the State and Defense Departments in the Clinton administration. Brian, thanks for joining us. Let's talk about this admission by Iran that it shot down Flight 752 by mistake. What do you think of that?
Well, first, my condolences to everyone in Canada who's grieving a loss. It's an awful mistake. I was surprised that the government authorities in Iran didn't fess up to these facts earlier. But I think hopefully it's a sign that they're willing to be more transparent about what actually occurred. And I think the key question moving forward now is whether there will be accountability for this awful mistake.
Some have suggested that this might be the extent of their transparency, that by making this admission, this would not absolve them, but allow them to not then allow international investigators on the ground, in particular Canadian investigators who want answers. What do you think about that in terms of future transparency from the country?
That could be the case if we look at how the Iranian government